Better Buildings for Humans is powered by Advanced Glazings, makers of the Solera line of products. Solera is the leading glass glazing made specifically for architectural daylighting and with extreme insulation performance. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Better Buildings for Humans. I'm your host, Joe Menchefski. This is the podcast where we talk about the impact that the built environment has on our health, our productivity, our wellness, our general joy of being alive. And of course, we try to talk about sustainable design as well. I've got a very interesting, exciting, and unique guest this week. I finally got somebody from the Well Building Institute to join me. Let me introduce Minjia Yang, the Vice President and Head of Sustainable Finance with the Well Building Institute. Minjia, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure and it's an honor, and I'm so excited. Obviously, the Well Building Institute's mandate aligns very well with the sort of goals of this program. So it's wonderful to have you here. Let's start by having you give our listeners an opportunity to know you better. Tell us about your background and tell us about the journey, the pathway that led you to IWBI.
Thanks so much, Joe. I'm Minjia Yang. I have a background in law, economics, and finance. So it's not a typical IWBI employee kind of profile because a lot of my great colleagues in IWBI have the background in building science, in engineering, design, public health, real estate. I think I brought this background because of my passion in sustainability and also just the simple idea that finance or legal professionals should not just be limited to work for the legal team or corporate finance team. It's actually very important to link those expertise, those areas of focus more closely with sustainability, which is the core business and the core standard and programming for IWBI. So that led to a shift in my career from more on the corporate venture capital side, looking at different wellness technology for the built environment in the early stage of my career, now to IWBI leading this global thought leadership platform with a focus on sustainable finance and social sustainability to really drive this movement of a holistic understanding and adoption of sustainability strategy, not just on the environmental side, but also incorporating the social factors.
That's really cool. Tell me how the law degree plays into your sort of day to day.
Yeah. So for my day to day, there's a lot of emphasis on reading about the global regulations, look at what's happening in different part of the jurisdiction in the world, what are the leading environmental, social, or governance topics included in regulation, and also by digesting different sustainable finance frameworks, as well as supporting our clients in the day to day, including their strategy setting, their sustainability reporting, because well, it's not just about incorporating into the design process. It's also about continuing into the operations phase, which involves a lot of handholding from our partners with our client organizations to achieve the current coverage of well globally.
Oh, that's wonderful. I don't think I fully appreciated that. Let's make sure everyone understands what IWBI is, understand its goals, and understand how it goes about achieving those goals. Let's cover that first.
Of course. So, IWBI International Well Building Institute, we are a global thought leader in driving people first strategies for buildings, organizations, and communities. And we do this through evidence-based system called WELL. And within our WELL standard, there are 10 core concepts, including air, water, nourishment, light, movement, thermal comfort, sound, materials, mind, and community. So you might be familiar with some of those concepts as a lot of environmental focus or green building standards already cover those concepts. But I think the key difference for our standard, the WELL system, is that every criteria, every strategy we set has a human centric or people first angle. So not just about energy efficiency or GHG emission reduction, but also about how environment contribute to human health, well-being, and productivity.
I love it. You don't do the certification.
So the certification, it needs to be third party verified.
Okay,
There
okay.
are organizations in different part of the world that will support this step. So we cannot be the judge and the athlete at the same.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, yeah, you can't be the judge and the coach at the same time. Yeah, okay, that's really cool. Okay, so what are the key components or categories? You mentioned the 10 items. Is that how it's broken down, or is there another methodology for breaking down the components?
Yeah, so within those 10 concepts, there are also over 100 different strategies. So we call that feature, and under each feature there are also one or more feature parts. So everything is publicly available through our website. We have a digital standard, and you can browse through both the well standard and also other rating systems. So we have the well health safety rating, well equity rating, well performance rating, and these are can be considered as subsets of strategies that, like, we draw from the broader umbrella, which is the well standard.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about growth and penetration. The certifications that focus on energy are certainly growing for obvious reasons. More and more projects are it just need the help as the building codes become more and more stringent. Are you seeing similar growth on the well side? I mean, we're certainly learning more and more about the impact that buildings have on our health. So I'm assuming you're seeing regular growth. Is that the case? And can you give me some idea of where the growth is coming from?
Of course. So, yes, we are very excited to see the global expensive growth as well. And so far, has covered over 5.6 billion square feet of projects in 136 countries in the whole world. And
Wow.
so I'm originally coming from China. So I'm very proud to see that there's one region in China, which is in the Midwest of China, that recognize well, not just in their policy, but also in their financial incentive. So the way they incentivize project to pursue well is that they provide a one-time rebate worth 300,000 RMB per well certified building. And then beside China, also like tremendous growth rate in the broader APAC region. For example, in Australia's Victoria state government also incorporated well into the state guideline for sustainable investment. So not just promoting a certification, a healthy building, but also writing that into like the financial mechanism to further promote and capitalize on sustainability. And also, Mexico's first sustainable taxonomy was just published early last year, and it was on organic recognition that well was incorporated into three economic activities in that taxonomy. So we see a lot of, from Latin America, North America, China, Europe, different regions, almost some regions that we didn't have that strong of a presence or policy advocacy efforts, but there's so much organic growth and recognition by government, by corporations, by industry associations. And I think going back to Joe, your question more, the transitioning from the green building movement now to the healthy building, I think we are not competing with those green building standards. And actually, we have a very strong alignment with those green building certification systems or rating systems in a way that we complement them by adding that human first, human centric angle. And for example, with certifications like LEED, BREEAM, Green Mark, we all developed crosswalks with those systems to help our client organizations and also the broader stakeholders in the society to align their well and health and well-being strategies with their energy efficiency targets, so creating a much more holistic approach to sustainability. And also similarly, when we're talking about the ESG world, looking at the ESG benchmark for real estate, the most leading example is GRESB. And even GRESB is increasingly incorporating social angles, health and well-being modules into their system. And then we also officially announced the partnership with GRESB with a focus on promoting social sustainability in the system. So this kind of collaboration and broader partnership to enable this ecosystem will really enhance not only people's mindset, but also like in the future, how they're incorporating all those mindset into the actual project in the everyday practice.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, we certainly know that the way we design our buildings and the way we design our communities has just such a massive impact on how we live. And I love. I'm a huge believer that if we focus exclusively on energy, we're going to create terrible buildings. So the fact that we're focusing on something broader and is really promoting that is really great to hear. And it's sort of a nice lead into this next question. I run into cross purposes on a regular basis. I work in the world of architectural daylighting myself, and occasionally you will see the energy and human centric design. Sometimes they're at cross purposes. For example, like you know where we are on building envelope thermal performance code requirements now, it requires reducing glazed areas, so fewer windows for people to see, fewer opportunities to bring in natural light, fewer opportunities for natural ventilation, which are all critical to human health, yet they run counter to absolute minimalization of energy. Is there anything within your organization, like a specific mechanism or an effort or anything like that, to deal with those occasional conflicts of, I'll call them a conflict of interest, just for lack of, or conflict of goals is a better thing to say. How do you deal with that?
Right, that's a very interesting question, Joe. Actually, allow me to disagree with this perception or conclusion of conflicts. I actually
Hmm.
don't think that's conflict. I think in many situations, it's not about we choose this one or the other one. It's not about making compromise. It's about integration and optimization when it comes to energy efficiency, when it comes to environment perspective and people first strategies. So I think in a lot of our well projects, they also achieved really high level of energy efficiency and even net zero. So one great example, you mentioned having the guest speaker from Singapore. So I had the opportunity to visit Singapore last summer, and specifically paid a visit to the University of Singapore and had a really wonderful tour of their SDE4 building, which is under the College of Environment and Engineering. So that's the first net zero building in the entire country, which is also the first well certified building in the country, and also the first well certified university building in the entire world. So that's a great example of how, the school is made did a fantastic job balancing energy efficiency and human well-being. So for example, talking about glazed area, the typical design methodology is to design like a concealed envelope. So we have all these energy concealed, and it's contribute to energy efficiency. But look at SDE4 building, its facade design moves away from this typical thinking on sealed envelope. And instead, it uses an open and dismountable design that actually maximizes natural ventilation. And from outside, when you're looking at that building, you can see it's almost in the shape of multiple boxes um, placed at different platforms, different like leveled platforms. So this kind of design uses this open design of facade, encourages natural ventilation, and they pair that with a hybrid cooling system that combines ceiling fan with AC. And actually, for most of the time, just thinking about Singapore, this weather is even more challenging than a lot of other part in the world, with the average day temperature above or in the upper 80s degrees Fahrenheit. So it's very interesting to see that actually this cooling system allows fan alone to provide sufficient cooling most of the time in the year. And like when I was sitting in the office or like just in the common area, I feel like the right level of moisture and the freshness in the air. And that's the magical part of the design. So that reduces energy use while maintaining thermal comfort for occupants. So this building not only integrate shading devices to minimize heat, but also has a green roof with solar panel design. So it really achieved net zero and became a great example for not only the country, but for educating the next generation of leaders in architecture, in design.
Yeah, see, that's huge, right? I mean, you're creating something more sustainable. You're creating something more comfortable, more healthy, and a true sort of, well, it becomes a thought leadership, or at least a project to which the others can look when they're trying to figure out how to move these conflicts from being conflicts to being opportunities to solve two problems or multiple
Mhm.
problems simultaneously. And I absolutely love that. I'm glad we got a chance to talk through that. I want to talk about sustainable financing or financing for environmental sustainability. It's not something I've ever talked about on the program, and it's something we really should dive a little deeper into. How does IWBI incorporate sustainable finance factors, of course, backed by research,
Mhm.
that lead to better outcomes in this category?
Yeah, so our journey, or like all those lessons, really started from 2017. So back then, I was still, like in managing some of the business development and strategic partnership for the Asia market. And there, when I was in Hong Kong, I witnessed this interesting innovation of incorporating well into green bond framework, specifically use of proceeds. So how you allocate the green bond proceeds to finance green projects. So that's like under a green bond framework. Because back then, Hong Kong government was trying to set up this green finance hub and position Hong Kong as the green finance center in the world. And they definitely want to do above and beyond than a lot of leaders in the Western countries. So there's a lot of policy incentives, there's government and industry association guidelines really calling for a level of innovation and localization of sustainable finance principles. So a group of leading real estate developers who are also very early adopters of well, as we have a great penetration in the real estate sector, they started by thinking, okay, if the green bond is only requiring us or asking us to focus on energy efficiency or green building criteria, how can I innovate from there? Because everyone is already doing green building. So they innovated by not challenging the fundamentals of existing industry guideline or principle, by saying, I would do everything about green building. I'll still achieve those traditional green building certification or rating system, but at the same time, can you allow me to add well into this mix? So back then, in the market of Hong Kong and Asia, green financing is still the most leading tool because the sustainable finance instruments are not as diverse as we saw like in the recent years with the sustainability linked or social angle, right? Back then it was just very hyper focused on green. And there's also issues of like if we pivot to other type of financial instrument, well, that caused some sensitivity in the society because there's a cultural consideration as well. So I would say back then, that very first innovation really shows the way of innovate without challenging the fundamental and shows like people's thinking of building sustainable building or green building has been evolving since the early days. So fast forward to recent years, we've seen a lot more examples of well being incorporated as core key performance indicators, core KPIs in sustainability linked finance, which is a relatively new financial instrument. So we're moving away, not completely moving away, but expanding the green finance into sustainable finance, right? Looking at sustainability linked finance, which is broader in nature, which organizations can incorporate a variety of environmental, social, or governance metrics into the framework. And we saw a stronger role that well plays as being considered, especially as a social KPI. And these mechanisms directly tie with a pricing reduction mechanism, meaning if you achieve those predetermined KPIs in the cycle of your loan or credit facility, then you're eligible to unlock a lower loan interest rate. So that's a very direct business case. That's a very direct ROI story. And that's quite different from our traditional research methodology, which is more relying on turning intangible health and well-being benefits into a dollar amount, which is inherently a topic in economics than finance, because it's not that straightforward. It probably take at least like 10 different steps to turn those benefits into a dollar amount. So I think those momentum and trends in sustainable finance is super helpful because it helps sustainability professionals, standard setters, and corporations speak that financial language by recognizing the benefit, the dollar amount early on, or like have a fixed mechanism, and you have the projection that at what point I can unlock what financial incentive by achieving what KPI. So I think it's much more straightforward, and we're still in the early stage though, but I hope, the market in the near future will not just be recognizing a few basis points, it can be reducing maybe 50 or more basis points. So it offer a bigger financial incentive for people to drive capital to more qualified environmental or social projects.
So is that capital coming from the private markets, or is that primarily a government-driven capital?
It's coming. So when we are talking about capital markets, when we are talking about bonds,
Yeah.
we're talking about the public market. So
Okay.
like, anyone can be the investors. It can also be a government-led bond. So to fund specifically government-led projects, it can happen to at the corporation level as well. But when we're talking about loan credit facility, that's like a private market realm. So it also happens with private market. It's very flexible.
Right. So you're seeking investors, private investors that want an ROI, but also want to make a difference in a better planet. Is that an oversimplification, or is that accurate? Somewhat accurate.
I think it's definitely like definitely a good inclusion of this trend, and just want to emphasize that this trend needs a collaboration among government, among financial institutions, among corporations, because corporations need to be the one to tell their sustainability story, to tell their sustainability strategy and roadmap, to
Right.
inform how the banks, the underwriters, their lenders of the loan understand their framework, to inform how their assurance providers who come to verify, right, second party opinion providers or assurance providers, to come verify whether you did your job, whether your framework is valid. So there needs to be a lot of market education and communication and collaboration among all these key stakeholders.
This is so much deeper than I'd imagined. I love it. Let's talk about social KPIs. It's a term I've never heard before. Can you give us a couple of examples just to make sure that everybody understands what that means?
I always use one example as the bad example. So a lot of times organizations need to choose what they call ambitious but achievable KPI, right? Because it's not just about like using a list of KPI and unlock the financial benefit. That's great for the company. It's also about, especially for the public companies or those large companies who also have the responsibility to communicate what they're doing, their like financial activities with their shareholders and other stakeholders. It's oftentimes also about being transparent and disclose those information. And you don't want to set a goal that's not ambitious and say that you are a leader in sustainability. So one example I always use is to say, if your company already has, for example, 20% of female board members, and you tell me that your social KPI for the next 5 to 10 years linked to your like sustainable finance framework is to increase 20% of female board members to 25%. Do you think that's an ambitious goal? I don't think so. And
Mhm.
I think like oftentimes the social KPI is easily falling under the narrow realm of board diversity. And whenever it comes to board diversity, it's about gender diversity or some health and well-being metrics, but really looking at lagging indicators like the number of injury in a workplace rather than well-being promotion metrics. And actually, according to several research in the recent years, since the inception of sustainable finance or sustainability linked finance since 2017, there has only been 23% of social KPIs incorporated in the entire issuance of sustainability linked finance. So that's a huge market pain point. And I think what benefits or value system like WELL and probably other rating systems, certification system bring to the table is that we are never just one KPI or three KPI. Achieving well or a certain percentage of your portfolio achieved well at what level, right? That's a typical KPI we see our clients use to demonstrate their commitment to social sustainability. That's never just indicating like one single metric. That's usually indicating that you've achieved a set of strategies. If not over 100, then at least like a comprehensive set of strategies within the wealth system. And that speaks louder than one single metric. And that's also third party verified because we ask clients, they need to go through this comprehensive performance verification system, whether it's document review or like the actual on site testing. That information needs to be verified, and that speaks stronger when we are providing that data, or clients are providing that data to their assurance provider for to the regulator, to their investors. That speaks louder than the self-reported data.
I'm going to ask you a question that's maybe way outside of your mandate, but I'm going to ask anyway. And if it's outside of your mandate, that's cool. I had the good fortune of having Pascal Sablon, an architect from New York, on the show some time ago. And she talked about architecture in marginalized communities and urban planning in marginalized communities and how it could be a pathway out of, some bad cycles, bad social cycles. Does that come into play at all? Like sort of, a commitment to community and a commitment to, bringing all communities up to, a prosperous, healthy, happy level. Is that part of well in any way? And if so, could you help me understand where it comes in?
Yeah, of course. So we have a concept called community. There are also like different aspects that we touch about. For example, integrated design, where we engage communities, different stakeholder groups in the early design stage of each project. And there's also another feature that I always use when conducting the alignment exercise between WELL and leading regulations on sustainability, which is the historical acknowledgement feature. So historic acknowledgement require projects to acknowledge the historical rights, the occupants of different indigenous communities and like communities from like these marginalized areas. And I think features like that with an emphasis on vulnerable population with a focus on engagement with the community is really important to be integrated in the design stage and also continue to the operation stage.
Okay. Well, okay. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to know. I I want to talk a little bit about reporting since you just brought that up. New rules coming out globally, EU regulations on sustainability and reporting. How does Well assist your clients on the reporting side of it? Like, dive in a little bit into the mechanics of how you hold their hand and help them work through all these new regulations that require, you know, complete clarity and disclosure.
Of course. So, one key area of focus for my team on the thought leadership side is also to conduct alignment or mapping exercises between well and different regulations, or sometimes even a sustainability standard is not recognized or incorporated into a piece of regulation. But if it's very, very widely adopted globally, then we will also like take a look at these different standards and try to provide the alignment tool for the market. And at the end of Q2 this year, we actually launched the most recent alignment tool, which is the ESRS alignment tool. So ESRS, the full name is the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. It's a very important piece of regulation under the European Commission, really like a backbone of everything they're doing on corporate disclosure on sustainability matters. And it also broadens organizations' thinking from just the environmental part of disclosure to the social part as well, as the whole system recognize, four different key stakeholder groups, which became the structure of the social pillar. So S1 is about a company's own workforce. S2 is about workers in the value chain. S3 is about affected communities. And S4, end users and consumers. So this is a really people first structure, which is very much aligned with IWBI's mission and WELL's goal. So we conducted this WELL ESRS alignment in collaboration with Cornell University, Brooks School of Public Policy. And together, we identified that WELL may support up to 50% of the ESRS requirements across environmental, social, and governance pillars. Of course, we have the strongest level of alignment with the social pillar. And under the social pillar, so when we talk about social sustainability, I think the angle that WELL brings to the table, the strongest angle we have is S1, looking back at ESRS context, is S1, a company's own workforce. So we can support almost a majority of S1, a company's own workforce requirement in the disclosure under ESRS context. So that's a very encouraging message to our clients, to our community, because you're not so far away from those meeting those new regulations. Maybe you're already doing a lot of things based on WELL strategy or people first strategy that you can report on. So get started early. And we are providing all those tools to really facilitate and hold our clients' hands in this journey facing the constantly evolving landscape of regulation.
I should have asked this first, but let's take a moment and make sure that everybody understands the definition of social sustainability.
Mhm.
Can you lay that out for everybody just to make sure we're on the same page in terms of making sure we know what that terminology means?
Yes, so we often use the terminology definition from the UN Global Compact, which is about social sustainability, is really to drive the thriving of people. So I think that people first angle in the definition is really important because sometimes when we talk about social sustainability, our brain tend to dive specifically into areas, whether it's health or safety, whether it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether it's community engagement. But at the end of the day, we can be inclusive of all these topics or subtopics as long as we understand we're approaching sustainability with a people angle. And we don't necessarily need to divide social and environmental like so distinctively because there's an organic connection.
Right.
If people thrive and the planet thrive, the whole world thrive. Like there's an organic connection. Just as buildings, it's not just about energy efficiency, it's about human health and well-being as well.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for that. All right, I'm going to ask my $1 million question. There's a question that I ask every single guest, and I ask them to answer it from whatever perspective they'd like.
Mhm.
Okay, so Minjia, what makes a great building?
I think a great building is one that balances sustainability and the human experience. It's not just about environmental sustainability, energy efficiency, or aesthetics. It's about how space impact the people inside it. So whether we do it by promoting health, comfort, community engagement, there are like a ton of strategies organizations, developers, and individuals can think to promote that space. And I think that's what makes a building truly great. So WELL looks at everything from air quality, water quality, thermal comfort, natural light, to creating spaces that foster mental well-being, equitable social equity in the space. Because if we think that if people are not thriving in a space, we can really call that sustainable. We can just remove people from that equation.
Amen. Oh my God, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Before we go, is there anything that you'd like to share? Any exciting news or important news or anything that you'd like to promote, Minjia?
Of course, I'm excited to share that IWBI is hosting our Social Sustainability Summit in New York City, December 13th at Citibank HQ. So the summit will focus on really important themes that like some of that we already touched in the podcast today, like the intersection of social sustainability, regulations, and sustainable finance. So the summit is designed to bring together leaders from different sectors, whether corporations, investors, financial institutions, real estate, civil society, and other innovators. They're all welcome to join the discussion and join the event to help us elevate this conversation around how we can drive capital and policies towards social sustainability. We'll also be discussing really important topics like just transition, diversity, equity, and inclusion, community, and how organizations can contribute to a more sustainable and equitable economy. So it's a great opportunity for anyone who's interested in learning how social factors can shape the future of sustainability. You can check out more details from our event webpage.
Wonderful. Minja, thank you so much. It was amazing how much information you packed into 40 minutes. I can't thank you enough. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much. It's a great conversation.
Take care. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Better Buildings for Humans. For more information on the world's best light diffusing and highly insulating glass glazing, please visit advancedglazings.com.